All right, so boom. It's been a week since the NFL draft, and Shedeur Sanders' slide all the way through from a projected top 10 pick down to the 5th round. And I've been hearing a lot of opinions, people feeling as if he was completely done wrong and tried to make an example of, other people saying he went exactly where he was supposed to be. And I'm somewhere in the middle because I've listened to a ton of different people's takes. I had my own opinion about where it was that he was going to go. And first and foremost, let me preference this as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan who wanted to see us draft a quarterback in the 1st round. We ultimately ended up getting Will Howard in the 6th. So I'm happy that we got a quarterback. It didn't matter who the quarterback may have been, but we just need, well, maybe if as long as it wasn't Jalen Milroe. I don't think I would want Jalen Milroe, but because we could have legitimately had that same variation with the Justin Fields, but that's neither here nor there. We ended up getting Will Howard, so I'll see where that goes because I have no interest in seeing what Mason Rudolph nor what Skylar Thompson can bring to the table. I don't give a damn about what they've done whatsoever. I wanted to just see a new quarterback at the helm, so we ended up getting Will Howard. But as it pertains to Shedeur Sanders, let me say this much. First and foremost, people who are crying, well, this is possibly something along the lines of racism, I think that's an incredible take to have. Why is that? Because the number 1 overall pick was literally black. Like, I understand if there's a, uppity Negro kind of angle that you want to take with Shedeur. He's too boisterous and cocky or whatever the case may be. And well, when it was Johnny Manziel and Baker Mayfield, that was what was considered moxie and confidence and bravado. But when it's Shedeur, it's immaturity or whatever. I can understand where you're going with that, angle, but it's a foolish way to kind of present it because, again, Cam Ward went number 1 overall. And furthermore, all 3 of those quarterbacks all ended up on the Browns, which is hilarious. Of the 3, obviously, Baker Mayfield had the most success, taking a team to the playoffs and then ultimately winning a playoff game for the first time this side of the millennium. But ultimately, where is he at now? Left the team, went to 2 other teams, 3 other teams, and currently right now in Tampa Bay, killing it. So I'm happy for Baker. He signed that $100 million deal, but that's neither here nor there. Manziel, obscurity. But now that Shedeur is on a team now, ultimately, everybody's opinion about him, he can right all of those wrongs, and furthermore, embolden his claim of being the best quarterback in the draft class by just simply balling out. Because being a 5th round pick, all it takes is 2 seasons of this man absolutely torching up the league, or at least putting up comparable numbers if in the event he gets that opportunity to play, or when that opportunity presents itself. All it takes is 2 years of just spectacular play, and you're in a situation where they fixing to go and pay you, because call it what it is, the Browns don't have a quarterback. Right? Because Deshaun Watson, they overpaid for him. Once his thing lapses and he's up out of there, now they're going to need a QB for the future. If Shedeur wins in the quarterback battle, because they got, 5 QBs in that room? So if Shedeur wins that battle, because it will be a battle, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to give it to old man Flacco. I don't think Dylan Gabriel, who got drafted in front of him, is going to be a shoo-in to start. Watson might not mess around and be healthy when the time comes. And there's one more quarterback who's there, and it's escaping me, but one way or another, right? He has an opportunity to go and play. I will say this much. Against the argument for the Shedeur camp, I think they did a terrible job leading into the draft of how they would market him, because outside of Deion, Shedeur, and everything else, it's as if they just thought it was a far-gone conclusion. Hey, we going top 10 regardless. Let's call it what it is. Deion himself, because I don't want to try to compare him to his father extensively, but when Deion came out in '89 into the NFL draft, he was a consensus top 5 pick that was going to go. Hence why he can do the type of things of walking into the Giants room and say, oh, wait, which pick y'all got? Oh, I'm not even going to be available by then. Go to the damn combine, only run to 40 and do nothing else. It was a far gone conclusion that was going to be the case. That wasn't necessarily, I guess, what the full conversation and consensus thought process was around the league. The media may have believed that much, but maybe not so much the league. Now, I will say this much. There was a whole lot of anonymous, statements that were made about, they're overshooting how good he is, and most GMs don't have him on the draft board, or maybe the interviews and things have definitely knocked him down a peg. There seems to be a lot of the immaturity and I don't want to say overconfidence. I'd rather go more towards the cockiness of how he held himself going into, not going to the combine, to pro day, things of that nature, going and saying statements like, hey, if you want to change the culture of the franchise and everything of that nature, then I'm the guy. But if you don't want to do that, then hey, go elsewhere.
If you ain't trying to change the franchise or the culture, don't give me. So you should know history repeats itself over and over and over. And I've done it over and over and over. So it should be no question why an NFL franchise should pick me. You think I'm worried about what critics say or what people got to say? You know who my dad is? They hated on him too. So it's like it's almost normal. Without people hating, it's not normal for us. So we like diversity. We like everything that comes with the name. That's why we are who we are.
Albeit, we all know exactly what it is that he's talking about. And truly, you want to have a quarterback who has that kind of attitude, but you ain't got to say it. Let your game do the talking for you. Because if you look at Shedeur's numbers, they're spectacular. And on top of that, given that he had the worst offensive line, I don't think there's a quarterback who's been sacked more than Shedeur the last 2 years when he was at Colorado. I don't think anybody's been sacked more than him. And the numbers that he's been able to put up is absolutely insane. Some people could talk about, well, he's a check down special. Look how many plays he made with virtually nothing. Now, albeit there's a lot of broken plays, because we've seen that happen a lot with Johnny Manziel. We've seen that happen a lot with Lamar Jackson when he was over there. And granted, those guys are Heisman, trophy winners. It's college football. It's played completely different than at the professional level. It's very difficult to mess around and do those kinds of plays. But I can hear you all right now. Well, Lamar does it, or Patrick Mahomes goes and does it. And think about what those caliber of players are. We're talking about guys who are multiple-time MVPs. You have a Super Bowl champion, multiple-time Super Bowl champion, who's legitimately in conversations of the top 3 quarterback of all time already through 7 seasons as a starter, and then a 2-time MVP who you could argue could have been a 3-time MVP in Lamar Jackson, who's well on his way to a Hall of Fame career. Shedeur hasn't played an NFL snap yet, but we could talk about trajectory all day, but we have to, wait to let things develop to see how he'll play at the league. But ultimately, he should have never said something like that, because it's going to be very off-putting to owners who's looking at like, oh, wait a minute. So just you solely is going to come in, transform the franchise. When you hear it from somebody's lips, it kind of feels a bit off versus if it's just a play that does the talking for you. I know it sounds like cope. I completely get it, but that's just the reality of the situation.
We're here, we're in good spirits, of course. God don't make mistakes. We got faith in God no matter what.
Of the 32 teams, how many of those teams really needed a quarterback for now? Because you got to keep in mind, Shedeur is a very polarizing character, because you have that albatross of Deion, who is a Hall of Famer of all Hall of Famers, who's incredibly visible, present, and in the media, who definitely has that ability to say something and create a rise, not only in media, but legitimately from within your organization. Let's just say Shedeur go to a team, he's, the backup quarterback, you're number 2. The starter makes any sort of issue on the field. Let's just say it's an interception. You got a bad day, whatever the case is. The camera crew is immediate. They're not even going to give you a chance to redeem yourself. They immediately zooming on Shedeur. The commentator, well, you got to wonder when they're going to take a chance on Shedeur Sanders. Every single conversation post-game, or even middle of the game, because now you have those sideline reports in betwixt quarters or even at halftime. Oh, well, we're going to get an opportunity to see Shedeur Sanders. We see we're struggling at the quarterback position. Like, it's going to be a situation where it's a circus, and a lot of different organizations don't want to deal with that. Hence why somebody like Cam Newton doesn't have a job, when he's a better backup than probably about 15 of the backups that are in the league right now. But that has happened across the NFL for several different years. That's why when you got aging receivers, running backs, whatever the case may be, but they're still relatively, able to give you a bit of production because they happen to have that mystique about them. Better to just not have them on your roster and deal with the baggage that comes with them than to, keep somebody else who you can just have there in rotation. But primarily from the quarterback position, that can become a super distraction. This is not by any estimation, the same sort of situation. It's a bit of a false equivalency, but follow me when I make this analogy. Take a look at somebody like a Michael Sam, right? He was drafted 7th round, whatever the case may be. He was coming off of being the conference player of the year when he left Mizzou, right? Openly gay, whatever the case may be. And in that, at the time in 2014, even still now, but that then was such an incredible feat for him to go and come out going into the draft. All of a sudden, there were storylines that was solely centered around what would come with this man being drafted. And suddenly you watch him fall all the way down to the 7th. I think had he not said enough, he probably going to end up messing around going to 3rd round. Now, granted, I'm not super into college football like that. I watch a bit here and there. I'm a bit knowledgeable about certain sort of the intricacies of the different sort of players and stuff like that. But there's no denying that there was a situation to where everybody was pretty much on edge to see where he got selected. And the moment that man's got selected, Hard Knocks coming to St. Louis, everything of that, super amounts of camera attention that's going on right there. So now it's a circus that is centered around one player in the midst of your locker room when you got 52 other guys, let alone you're not even in a situation where it's a guaranteed roster spot. But you've got 90-some people, well, 40 that's attempting to make the team. You've got maybe about 40 others who are a shoe-in to pretty much, maintain their position, and then other individuals like a revolving door trying to mess around and get into the organization. But all of the attention is centered on one person. Why do I bring that up? Same situation would mess around and happen with Shedeur. Think about it. How much coverage was solely placed on Shedeur Sanders? An exponential amount.
You step in and do some of that if it's the wrong organization and say he ain't going there.
Yeah, but I'm not going to do it publicly. I'll do it privately.
Yeah. Okay.
So you said you're going to be dad. You're going to be dad. You're going to be dad.
Dad, cows come home.
And truly, in my opinion, if I had to pinpoint who I think is the most responsible for Shedeur's slide, it's Deion Sanders, his father himself, because he's been doing too much talking from last year to when he was talking about, well, if they happen to be a situation in which his son gets drafted by a team that he doesn't approve of, then they can mess around and pull an Archie Eli Manning situation to where now they're going to try to see if they can force a trade or something. Like, what are you saying this for? Your son isn't you. And we're in a completely different era now. That type of stuff is not going to mess around and slide. Just too much yapping from Shedeur's camp. And then unfortunately, although he does have a lot of good stuff on tape, I don't think it's so much so to where he still would have been a consensus top 5 pick. Because remember what I mentioned prior, it's primarily the media that was pushing that he was up there in that consensus top 10 pick, right? Amongst the organizations, we can't say that was the same thing that was echoed within their war room. We're only hearing what the media was telling us. So if they're pushing that, hey, he's up there, we're supposed to sit there and assume that's the case. He won the award for the quarterbacks in college and everything of that nature. But who's to say that's what's being reflected there in those war rooms? And to have not only Deion talking in front of a camera, albeit, because let's just say he was talking in jest. You don't do that publicly, because there's a ton of people who won't be able to decipher if you're serious or not. And then Shedeur's performance in those interviews, him in front of the camera, the bravado that just so happened to be there, the individuals who weren't introduced to you when you were playing in college, this being their first impression of you, just everything just coming off the wrong way and sideways. Because what ultimately is the drafting process? It's a job interview. Despite being in a situation where you can be ultra talented, if there's anything that can tell you that the character is incredibly important, probably the past decade in the NFL and really across all sports, if you happen to have bad character, that almost supersedes your ability on the field, court, whatever sort of location that you happen to play any sort of sport professionally or attempt to play the sport professionally. Because once they get a sour taste in their mouth from how it is that you talking and how it is that you moving, despite the fact that it's not even like Shedeur done committed a crime. You got motherfuckers who committed crimes who got drafted and everything of that nature. But you know what the perception is in the sports. Once they say, I'm going to associate you into this bracket, I don't want to say there's nothing you can do, but you've got to fight and claw to be viewed differently. And again, I'm not saying that's right, but we got to call a spade a spade. You know this coming in.
I can handle things, I'm smart.
And then ultimately the slide happens. There's more focus on Shedeur, even now, after him being drafted the 5th round, than Cam Ward, who was drafted number 1 overall, right? So I say all this to say, I think both sides of one saying that, hey, this was wrong, it makes absolutely no sense, which they have a legitimate claim, because I don't think there's any scenario where he should have got drafted behind Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milroe, or Dylan Gabriel. I think that is insane. And for the Saints to pass on him was ludicrous to me, because here you draft Tyler Shuck. This man has injury history. You might not even have Derek Carr there as your quarterback next year. He probably not even going to be available to play. You had Spencer Rattler. You gave up on that man. So what are you doing? You going from injury history to injury history? Does this make sense? I don't quite understand it, but that's neither here nor there, right? So I say all that to say, I get the argument there. However, I think it's foolish to also think that Shedeur's camp didn't also not play a role in the slide with the sheer arrogance. Because you got to remember, at the end of the day, it's the NFL's owner's team. So if the GM could say, I want this player, or whatever the case may be, if the owner were to come in and be on some, we don't want that dude at all, take him off the board, you overrule. Now, you can try to, I'm going to do what I want. What happens when you lose your job? Then what? Because at the end of the day, you got to answer to somebody, and ultimately the owner is who's going to be calling the shot the most. Now, I can't confirm that there was an owner that done came in and said, hey, take him off the board, but let's call a spade a spade. There's no way that we could sit around here and make it seem as if that's not something that happens in the NFL, right? A la Jerry Jones, but he's also the GM, so that's a different conversation. But one way or another, right, I'm seeing a lot of people emotionally stimulated heavily by this entire topic. I'm curious to know what your opinion just so happens to be, so you can leave that in the comment section. And again, I'll state this much. As a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I would have liked, and you saw in my video after the first round was concluded and we made our pick, although I'm happy that we beefed up our D-line, I was 100% in on us going and getting the quarterback in the first round, because in my mind, it was like, we're not going to have nobody available later in the doggone draft. But luckily enough, we got ourselves a quarterback. I'm not upset that we got Will Howard instead of Shedeur nor Jackson Dart. We'll see what things move going forward. But I'm glad with, ultimately what my team, the messed around and done did. I'm curious to know what y'all think about the Shedeur Sanders situation. I'm disappointed with how the media coverage has been since, because still the conversation is primarily around Shedeur rather than the remainder of the individuals who messed around and got drafted, because it seems as if nobody else matters. It's all on Shedeur, but granted, he generates a ton of clicks, so I get it. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Do you think it was a shot at Shedeur and the Sanders family to say, hey, stay in your place kind of situation? Or do you think it was a warranted situation? He was taken exactly where he should have been? Because I'm seeing a lot of people have their takes. I'm curious to know what yours is. So let me know in the comment section.